Hello and welcome to another episode of Resilience Rock Sales. Today, I am joined by somebody who really captures all of those things, the resilience and rocking sales and also leadership. We met very, very recently in an online networking group. And as soon as he shared a couple of things about what he does and what he's up to, I'm like, James, I need to get you to come and have a chat with us on the podcast. So I'm very grateful that James Michael from Justified Talent has actually come and joined us today. So welcome to the show, James.
Thank you, Stacey. Really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into some of the things that your experience, your background, your perspectives. What I'd really love to kick off with is it'd be really awesome just to get a bit of a sense of your personal and your professional journey. So it'd be awesome if you can give us a bit of a rundown of the James Michael backstory.
Sure. Okay. How long is this going to go for? Because I'm 61, right? There's a lot of story.
Okay, go for it.
So look, I'm born and raised in the wheat belt in WA. So that saw me in my teens in the 1970s in regional Western Australia. And if I'm honest with you, I couldn't get out of there quickly enough. And I'm not quite sure why I had this leaning, but I had a bit of a bent for all things military. And so the Army and the Air Force wouldn't have me until I turned 18. The Navy, however, would take me at, can you believe this, 15 3/4. So the Navy got me. Yeah, absolutely nuts, right? So it was a scheme that was called the Junior Recruit entry scheme. And you could join up at 15 3/4. You would sign on for 9 years. Like, can a 15 3/4-year-old really have any comprehension of what 9 years means? And how on earth my parents let me do that, I really don't understand. But anyway, I went into the Navy at 15 3/4. And primarily, kind of one of the big motivators to get there was because I absolutely hated school, right? I loathed school with a passion. And so I'd got to the end of year 11. I'd come to the clear conclusion that they weren't teaching me anything that would be of any use to me whatsoever in the real world, which, as a 15-year-old, I would know. But my plan was foiled because as soon as I went into the Navy, and I didn't realize this was going to happen, but they then threw me back into school to make me do year 12. Like we all had to do it. But so now not only am I back in school, but I'm in a very, very disciplined environment, which probably, as it turned out, was good. But I didn't stay with the Navy, right? So as soon as I could, I actually ended up leaving the Navy at midnight one night, and I was in the Army at 8 o'clock the next morning, which the Navy were a little bit upset about because they're breaking my contract and all that kind of thing. But we went through due process and it was all approved. And so I went into the Army. And that's where I absolutely flourished. Like I loved that world. I loved that environment. I loved what we were being taught and asked to do. And it has pretty much informed subsequently then everything else that I've done from there forward, right? And of course, resilience is at the heart of soldiering. And yeah, so did the military career thing for a number of years. When I got out, I can't actually completely remember what I was doing when I got out, but I've had a number of different kind of corporate lives in sales and in sales management. But around 2000, I co-founded a sales training business with an ex-British Army guy who's subsequently become pretty much as close as I've got to a brother. And yeah, so we ran that business for 15 years and we had a bunch of people that worked for us around the country as well. And Glenn and I kind of did things quite differently to what was the then traditional kind of training regime, because I was very, very big on experiential learning, right? I didn't want people just kind of hearing and seeing pretty things up on flip charts and the music, the pumpy music at the morning tea break and all that kind of thing. So yeah, we did a whole bunch of things that were quite different and experiential, which got us rave reviews, which was great. But what was kind of interesting for me was I actually disliked sales.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's almost like I'd fallen into sales almost by mistake. And I think to some degree it might have been to do with the fact that as an ex-professional soldier, it's like, okay, what do we do with this guy? What's he going to do career-wise? And, kind of sales seemed to be the obvious route. Yeah. And so I'm this close to finishing writing a book at the moment. It's called The S Myth. That's the working title. I'm hoping that I might get a foreword written by Michael Gerber, the author of the E-Myth. I'm going to need to move. Would be cool. I might need to move quick. I think he's in his 80s now. But yeah, and the opening line in this book says, and describes Glenn and I stepping into an elevator in a city building in Sydney. It's 8 o'clock at night. We're descending, and I turn to Glenn and I say to Glenn, "Oh, I've had enough of this sales rubbish. You do the sales, I'll just do the delivery." All right. And it was because right up to that point in time, I had this, despite being a sales trainer, I had this notion of what selling was, which was wrong, right? It was incorrect, right? And so I had all the fear of rejection stuff going on in my head because of this notion of selling was about twisting people's arms, and eventually they tap out, like you're holding them in a judo move or something, and eventually they tap out and say, all right, I'll buy, which is the antithesis of good selling, of course. Yeah. So at the same time, so that was in 2000 that we kicked that business off. In 2003, I kicked off a leadership development business, which essentially called on my military background. And so we would take groups of 10 managers from corporate Australia at a time out to a 1,000-acre property that I co-owned, and we would immerse them in a world of living hell for 4 days. They became an Army reconnaissance commando team. They had an overarching objective that they needed to achieve by 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. They arrived onto the property at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. So they arrived in darkness. The property's in the Kapiti Valley in New South Wales, which at the time had 0 phone signal. So even if they decided that they hated us and they wanted to escape, they had no chance of calling a taxi. There was nothing. It was desolate. It was great. Yeah. And so there were a number of missions that they needed to execute on the way through to getting to their final outcome. And in between time, we were giving them lessons on particular leadership aspects. And the notion behind it was that anybody can sail a yacht in calm waters. The true test of captaincy is when the storm arrives. And so this was 4 days of stormy weather for them. How long did that go? That went for 10 years. So 12 years. 2015 was the last time we ran one of those programs. But that was great stuff. That was really empowering stuff, and it was like every third testimonial from a client was this was life-changing, which wasn't something that I'd necessarily gone into it with an intention of achieving. But as it turned out, the 4 days were so confronting for them, and it caused them to look themselves, in a mirror in many respects, and to really think about who are they as leaders, but also as human beings, and all that kind of thing. And initially people would arrive and they would think that this is going to be about testosterone and you've got to grit and all that kind of stuff. And what we would end up talking to them about primarily was something that we often called the 14-inch journey. So from here to here, right? If you're only leading with this, you're going to have a problem. If you're only leading with this, you'll also have problems. So you've got to be doing this 14-inch journey the whole time. Unfortunately went through a massive kind of life upheaval, which included a divorce. So that meant that I got off the business kind of merry-go-round for a little while, went and got a real job again back in corporate Australia. And then at the end of 2017, I really had the yearning to go back into being my own business owner. And so kicked off what is the core business today, Justified Talent. Subsequently kicked off a number of other businesses, some of which I've recently just closed down and sold. So this journey as a founder, I'm also experiencing, which is great fun, except for when it's not. And so kind of here we are today, right? And so, the common thread through all of that and the bit that I didn't touch on was that I ended up getting qualifications in psychology. And so that the whole notion of the psychology of performance has been something that has fascinated me for quite some time. And then as I've had the exposure into the sales world and in the sales training arena, and I'm a passionate deliverer of training. I don't do any of that anymore, but when I do, I'm passionate about delivering training that is impactful and, outlasts the 1, 2, 3 days that the participants are having to put up with. That all of that kind of led to then when I kicked off this latest business, and it was catalyzed by a couple of things, one of which was I had turned 55. Was I 55 then? Yeah, 55. And of course, as a 55-year-old, despite all of my experience and my qualifications and all that kind of thing, apparently I was going to need nano naps and I probably wouldn't be able to keep up with technology and all that. And I probably wouldn't have energy and drive. And so I literally applied for 55 roles over a period of probably a couple of months. I heard back from three recruiters.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had been a user of recruitment agencies. I'd been a candidate, obviously. And in most instances, I had less than satisfactory experiences. And so I kind of thought, maybe there's an opportunity for me to build a recruitment firm and do it a little bit differently to how everybody else does. And where would I specialize? Well, I've been a business owner. I'm a big fan and supporter of small business owners in Australia and founders and all that kind of thing. What's a really important role that they need to get right? Salespeople. Well, you know a thing or two about salespeople, James. So out of that was born Justified Talent, and we specialize in helping small business owners to recruit generally their first salesperson. Sometimes it's number 2 or number 3 because they've DIY'd it and they've got it wrong and they're pulling their hair out and thinking, she was so good at the interview and
Yeah.
is no longer delivering. So that's a bit of a potted history for me. I live in Orange in the central west of New South Wales, which means that right now it's freezing cold.
Imagine.
Yeah. I've got 2 young adult kids. I've got 2 border collies and a partner. And yeah, that's me.
Sounds like life's good.
Yeah, life is good. Life is good. Yeah, I wouldn't be dead for quids, but life's pretty damn good, really. It's had its ups and downs, right? And that's the human experience. And this pursuit of happiness that people have, I often kind of question the sensibility of that. I just don't think the human existence has the capacity for constant happiness.
No.
I think there's always going to be something that's going to put a dampener on that. And just over a year and a half ago, my mum died at age 76. She had me when she was 16. So she and I were very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
So those things happen. So anyway, getting a bit kind of rambly now.
No, this is good. I really love where you're going because there's a lot of things that you've said that I'm like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Particularly, as you said, that constant pursuit of happiness. And I think, especially in young people, I think it's a trap.
Mhm.
And also, I think for parents thinking that their job is to make their kids happy, it's a little bit of a thing that I have very many conversations about because, again, if that's your whole aim in life, then like you're gonna have moments. But again, I always like it's always about the journey, not the destination, isn't it? And something else you said about the ups and downs. And I still remember there was a T-shirt that I remember buying a friend once, and it had the heartbeat monitor up and down. It said if there was no ups and downs in life, you would be dead. And I'm like, well, it's true, isn't it? And it's learning to, I guess, enjoy, appreciate, be grateful, learn from, grow from, be present in all of those things rather than always wishing that you were somewhere else or chasing something else. So I really love that you've brought that up. It's interesting. I was just reflecting when you first were saying about the whole Navy being the ones with the 15 3/4. They were desperate to get the jump on the other guys, weren't they? Straight away, I'm like, oh, I can see what they're doing there. And to sign them up for 9 years, like, oh, they really wanted to get the jump on those other guys, didn't they?
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. I mean, you'd have to question the legality of it, and I'm sure it was legal back in that time. But it was just nuts, And I think of how many of us would there have been? Probably about 120 of us
Really,
in
at
my
that age.
cohort. Yeah, who would have been somewhere between 15 and 17 years of age, and yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. It was good grounding, and you got 3 square meals a day, and you were homed, and you were told what time to turn up to the dentist, and you were told off if you didn't turn up to the dentist, and all that kind of thing. And there was no, where's your Medicare card, or are you on a private health fund? It was just all sorted, right? So it was fantastic in terms of it being an ecosystem to live within. And then the disciplines that were taught, that was really, really interesting. Interesting side note on that, for what it's worth for listeners. In the early 2000s, the Navy began an experiment, for want of a better word, at deploying transformational leadership throughout the Navy, right? And when you look at the Army and you look at the Air Force, the style of leadership, as much as most people think it's command and control, in the ADF, we tend to lean more towards the transformational style than we do, absolutely command and control. And junior soldiers are given leadership skills very, very early in their careers, right? We want soldiers to demonstrate leadership in the moment. The Navy ended up having to abandon that because what they realized was giving sailors a free head of steam, pardon the phrase, on board a ship was actually dangerous.
That makes
Right?
sense.
So it was absolutely about, this is the way we do it. We do it this way. We don't question things. And yes, there's probably questioning in terms of continuous improvement, et cetera, but in terms of the day-to-day functioning, it was definitely paint by numbers or follow the bouncing ball karaoke style. So not sure why I went off on that tangent, but
I think it's interesting because, again, we're chatting about there's leadership elements to that, and also just that structure and routine and things like that. So I'm curious then, how long had you been in the Navy when you went and decided you were going to go, I guess in their eyes, join the dark side?
2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But you
Only
wouldn't
2
even,
years.
weren't even 18, you wouldn't even been barely 18. Were you
Correct.
turned 18?
Yeah, I just turned 18.
Oh, because of course you
that
said you
time.
had to be 18 to join there. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was spurred on by, I was going to say it's a silly thing, but it's actually not a silly thing, really. I'm sure you'll be familiar with the Top Gun movie series, right? So Top Gun was in some ways instrumental in massively driving recruitment into the US Navy. Right now, I don't know whether Top Gun 2 has done that or not. Just recently on Netflix, there's been a contemporary version of a documentary around the United States Navy's Blue Angels, right?
Okay.
So they're aerobatic team. They're probably the best aerobatic team in the world, and I'm always gobsmacked by just how amazing they are. But again, the Blue Angels was created with an intention of recruiting people into the Navy Air Wing. For me, then, something happened in the UK in May of 1980, sorry, that was instrumental in me saying, okay, I want out of here and I want to go there. And it was actually the siege on the Iranian embassy in Prince's Gate in London. So that was the British SAS storming the Iranian embassy and getting the hostages out. And it was the first time that anybody had ever seen the SAS in action in public, right? And it was like, so this 17-and-a-half-year-old says, oh, I want to do that. So it was almost as though they'd done it as a PR stunt, as a recruitment kind of thing. But, I know that in 1980, the recruitment target was exceeded in the ADF. And a lot of it would have been simply because of that. Like all of us young boys' own annual idiots decided that we all wanted to be commandos and kicking doors off hinges and all that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, and because I still remember I was, when I went and saw Maverick, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this has totally gotta be like, there's gotta be some money from the US defense behind this." Because you do look at that and you go, "Yeah, this has gotta be in part a bit of a recruitment thing." But look, that's what they need to do because I guess these days, particularly, there's probably less and less people, less and less young people that are ever gonna look at that and go, "That's something I wanna do."
Yeah,
But could be
absolutely.
really useful for a lot of people though.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, as we sit here today, the ADF is about, I think I saw some numbers the other day, about 6,000 heads short of achieving its recruitment target.
That's
It's
a
just not a
lot,
career
isn't
that
it?
people are particularly interested in. And, to some degree, Afghanistan has caused that, and the subsequent kind of fallout from that in terms of our own personnel. I mean, really going off on a tangent here, but more soldiers have died at their own hands from suicide on return than died in the campaign.
Yeah.
Which
I
is,
know a few ex-military people, and yeah, they've definitely had there's a world of pain and consequence from their service, and not in the best way supported at times too. So yeah, I can see that it wouldn't be an attractive way. And I guess, and especially like, I think is also with young people, they're very, very comfortable. Parents have done a great job at making them very, very comfortable these days. So just the thought of having to do anything difficult or even have to do anything at all might be a little bit of a stretch, I guess. When you did leave the military and stuff like that, and sort of feeling that sales was something you just fell into. So what was it obviously doing hard things and probably, thinking that, oh my gosh, you can go into battle and you can deal with rejection. Was there anything specific that you sort of felt that was attractive for that role based on your military experience?
No, not really. If anything, it was more the reverse. It was like, okay, I can strip and assemble an M16 blindfolded in 40 seconds. What use is that going to be in the real world? None. And so as I looked at the various jobs that were being advertised at the time, I just couldn't see myself doing any of those things. And then I saw an ad which explicitly, and it was a sales role, and explicitly said, no experience required. And I thought, perfect for this. Now, sitting behind that, and again, so now I'm in my late 20s, but sitting behind that is, what the military's done for me is it's built my self-confidence. It's built my decision-making skills. As it turns out, I'm actually a natural risk taker. So clinically, as it turns out, I'm 2.5 times more inclined to take risks than the average person. And selling nowhere near as risky as necessarily being confronted by somebody who wants to try and kill you. So yeah, there was a confidence that I had in myself. And I don't know that I was conscious of that at the time necessarily, but yeah, no experience required. Perfect. I'm absolutely qualified for this. Right. So I threw my hat in the ring and we went through this process. And at some stage or other, I had to learn a sales script. Look, I hadn't even got the job yet, and I had to learn a sales pitch. And I then had to go in and deliver the pitch to the directors. And I nailed it, which in hindsight, I just think, oh my God, that was awful. What an awful way to be selling. You're delivering this canned pitch. And so that's when we got into it. And to their credit, they were pretty good with the sales meetings and sales training stuff for us. And so there was a cohort of us that had been hired all at the same time. And they were every morning we'd be watching Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy training videos. I even remember one with, what's his name? John Cleese.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was in that era where you throw in the VHS video and watch it on the tiny little screen. Yeah. So what that exposed me to already, like immediately, was the psychology of sales. Right. And again, I'd done the psych stuff in the army for distinctly different reasons, but as I got exposed to the psychology behind selling and the psychology of buyers, et cetera, again, that just kind of piqued something at the back of my brain. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed knowing about that stuff. I didn't necessarily enjoy the selling per se, but I enjoyed, I guess, the journey of learning that I went on about human psychology and purchasing decisions, et cetera, et cetera.
That is interesting. And again, like as I said, from the outside looking in, I would have thought, oh my gosh, there would have been lots of things that would have been, but as you said, you didn't see any of those things that would have been valuable to them. But I guess to an employer, someone that has obviously been in the military and done stuff like that, I guess they're probably going, well, okay, well, clearly they can follow structure, they can follow order, and they can do all these sort of things. I guess that to me, that sort of seemed quite interesting. But I like that you mentioned there about the psychology of buying and selling, but you also mentioned the psych stuff with the army. So what sort of exposure to psychology training, qualifications or anything did you do while you were in the army before you went into that, or did that come later?
So while I was in, so I did a double major. So I did a Bachelor of Social Science, and it had a double major in Human Resource Development and Psych. The Psych piece was the bit that Army wanted me to do. And yeah, the HRD piece was because that just kind of interested me. And I knew that I wouldn't stay in the Army forever and a day. And I didn't think that I would want to come out and be a psychologist. So I was interested in the HRD side, which then the combination of the two of those has worked really well for me from a career perspective, in terms of building and training businesses and running training it being high impact and all that kind of thing.
Oh, and I like when you look at it and then now where you are, that was a perfect grounding for you, wasn't it? As far as having those things and then now and the HR stuff, then now being in recruitment yourself. Because if you're working more specifically with people that are looking for their early hires in that thing, so you're looking at like with smaller businesses perhaps that you're probably going to be dealing directly with the CEO or the founder or that
Correct.
type of stuff, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very few. If I think of the 300 odd companies we've recruited for in the last 6 years, probably only 2 or 3 in total have had an HR person on the payroll at that point in time. And I hope I won't disenfranchise any listeners or viewers in saying this. The moment I hear there's an HR person involved, I shudder and kind of think, okay, do I want to be involved in this? Because I've often found that when I was doing the leadership stuff, we always had to be talking to the HR people. And of course, they were scared witless of what we were doing. Right? You're doing what? You're taking people into the bush for 4 days and they're going to get 4 hours sleep a night and it's going to be physically and psychologically, intellectually demanding. Oh my God. That would scare the crap out of, the bejeebers out of most HR people, right? And so, their risk aversion is very, very strong, and that's fine. I mean, it's meant to be. It's part of the job, right? So these days, one of the reasons that it was a subset reason, but one of the reasons that I chose to work exclusively with the small business sector founders who are ready to move from startup to scale up was because it also meant that I dealt with the business owner directly. But yeah, the psychology piece is still very, very strong because we don't operate like normal recruiters. Like we've just had, I noticed this morning on our database, we've had just passed our 10,000th applicant over the last 6 years. Not one of those people have we ever asked a resume from or a cover letter from. I don't believe in them. They're not predictively reliable instruments. And these days you can get ChatGPT to create it for you. So in terms of it being a document that you can rely on to predict somebody's likelihood of future success, irrelevant. We're much, much more interested in the psychological makeup of the individual and the degree to which that lends itself to success in the role or not.
And so I really love that because again, I agree with you. Being able to pop together a document from a template and especially these days, so much of because I've done some career coaching and stuff like that as well, especially when people are going for roles with bigger organizations, then they have to go down that route and then they have to know that the machines are going to be scouring it before the humans are and all that type of stuff. So there's kind of element of the hoops that you have to jump through in that thing. But it's so refreshing to hear that again, that you've got this different approach. And I'm guessing with that different approach, there must be an element of education and stuff that you're doing with those business owners to sort of show them that there's totally different approach. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, so say I was looking for my first sales hire and I was to approach you, what's the sort of the first couple of things that you would do in that instant?
In terms of the conversation with you,
Yeah.
it generally kind of kicks off with helping you understand that what it is that you think you're looking for might not necessarily be what you should be looking for, right? And I'll often share, I mean, obviously it differs from one conversation to another, but in general terms, I'll often share the results of a Harvard study that was completed that showed that the traditional methodology for selecting, screening, and recruiting new sales hires is fundamentally flawed, right? So that call for a cover letter, call for the resume, do a structured interview, maybe do a personality assessment and do reference checking. So they're the 5 fundamental, they're the holy grail of recruitment. The predictive reliability of that is 0.26, where the ideal number should be 1.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, right. It's smackingly useless.
They still keep doing it. They still keep doing it.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's really interesting. I've been banging away at this now for 6 years, and I'm prolific on LinkedIn, and every now and then I'll come back to this, the recruitment crystal ball is broken kind of thing. And yet, yeah, people are still so insistent on using it. Internal recruiters, even agency recruiters, that is the process, that is the method, because they don't really know any different So it's along those lines. So we'll kick off with that. And then it's a conversation around, so let's talk about then, what does the architecture actually look like of this person who's going to be successful in the role, right? And let's understand that we may not necessarily find perfection, but there's a point at which, if they're not close enough a match, then we need to say no to that person, right? There's a phrase that I often share, and that is, it really doesn't matter how much training you give to a donkey, it's never going to win the Melbourne Cup.
It's good call.
Right. Kind of looks like a horse. Eats what a horse eats. It dumps what a horse dumps. It wants to be a horse, boss. Really, not going to happen, right? Because it's not hardwired in the same way. And so what I'll kind of share with them is, as a recruiter, if you engage a recruiter, you've got to hold them to 2 KPIs, right? Number one, are they attracting the best possible talent in the marketplace to the opportunity? And then number 2, can they show you evidence that will prove this person has got a high likelihood of being successful in the role going forward? And the only way you can really do that these days is with behavioural analytics, right? And predictive hiring software. And yes, the technology's getting cleverer and cleverer. And, some people are uncomfortable with technology playing the role that it does in recruitment. But when you combine the 2 of them together, so I'm not so much talking about the technology that, passes the resume and looks for keywords. I'm not interested in that stuff, but the technology that allows us to see deep inside who this individual really is, actually is. Often as not, I'll hear a founder who will say, oh, I'm looking for somebody who's really driven and really hungry. And I cringe when I hear that, because it's, oh, really? So just for a moment, let's imagine you've got a salesperson sitting on the other side of your desk right now who is driven and hungry. How are you feeling about that person right now? You enjoying that conversation? How do you think your prospects will, right? And if they've had any exposure to DISC or something like that, then they're going to say, I'm looking for a high DI.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Why don't we find a Capricorn with an Aries rising?
I love that you say that.
Right. Come on. It's pseudoscience, right? So as you can hear, I get on a soapbox about this sort of stuff, because we really have been sold a bunch of snake oil when it comes to recruiting in general, but certainly in terms of recruiting salespeople. And the proof of that fact is in the fact that, in the latest HubSpot or Salesforce figures will confirm that yet again, this financial year, only around 55% of salespeople will have hit their target. Right. And that has been the case for probably the last decade. Right. And we can't blame COVID, and we can't blame the GFC, because they're all well past. And it's a global phenomenon. Around about 55% of people only hit their sales target. The average tenure of a salesperson right now in the Western world is 16.7 months.
Yeah, I think I saw something where it's about 18 months, but I'm not surprised that that's dropping.
Yeah, right. Do we think that people are leaving at the 17 months mark at the zenith of their career? No, they're not. They're jumping ship before they're made to walk the plank, right? Why? Because, and some of this is because we hired the wrong person. There's also another piece, and this is something that I spend a lot of time talking to founders about, is whether or not they've actually got the sales ecosystem in place to support that individual when they bring them in, right? So it's kind of another topic that we can go into if you want to. But do we really understand what the makeup needs to be of this individual in order for them to be successful? And then when you think about the difference between, if I go recruit somebody who's been at Google or who's been at Microsoft or has been at Tesla, and I bring them into your small business, it's not going to work either, right? They're going to be wondering, where's the print room with the 3 $50,000 color copiers? Yeah, that's called Officeworks, mate. You need to walk down the road to get that done. Right. So all of those sorts of things. There's a fantastic book that was written by Professor Boris Groysberg. It's a dry read because he's, professorial and he's from Harvard. But it's called Chasing Stars. And it's about the myth of talent portability. Right. And so because he's from Harvard, it's obviously based on research, and, this whole notion of chasing stars and headhunting and bringing them into our organization because of their stardom. What people don't understand is that stars live in constellations.
Oh,
right?
that's amazing.
That stars never ever a star on their own. It's because of the framework that surrounds them, the ecosystem, the culture, the whole thing. Even the simple little things like that old phrase of nobody got fired buying IBM, right? So that notion of that if I've got those three letters on my business card, that automatically means doors are easier to open, right? And so on it goes. So yeah. So a lot of my conversation with founders to begin with is kind of disabusing them of their belief in this is the way recruitment is done, right? Or should be done. I like to try and educate them about the fact that if you do that, then you're likely to get the same kind of outcome that almost every sales business has been experiencing for at least the last decade, if not more. Right. So if you're hoping to find somebody who will actually achieve targets and who's going to still be there in 3 years' time, we probably need to go about it in a different way.
Yeah, wow, there's so much in that. Yeah, I think there's a lot for our listeners to loop back
Hmm.
and listen to this a few times. I think that there's some really good takeaways there, particularly because you do hear that a lot, isn't it? Again, as you said, going from that startup to scale and just thinking that just getting a star salesperson is going to be that magic bullet that's just going to help everything just magically grow. But as you said, without the right infrastructure, without all of that sort of stuff in place, it's almost like you want to get that person and then get them to then create the whole role when they get there. That's not generally what they're good at. So I really love that you've shared that with us. I think there's a lot to think about there. So as far as your advertising, your job PDs, all that sort of stuff, and the job ads, I'm guessing that you would do that a little bit differently too.
Correct. Yeah. So the traditional job ad kind of has a whole bunch of heroic statements about we're number one in the marketplace. Well, that's funny. There's a whole bunch of number ones in your space for some reason. Okay. So there's a
Sure.
lot of egotistical rubbish, right, to begin with.
A lot of
And
wank.
then, okay, that right? But then they go to, and I call this the ransom note of demands, right?
Yeah.
The ideal candidate will possess, right?
Hmm.
And then there's this bullet pointed list, the ransom note of demands of what they're looking for this person to have in their tool bag. We don't do any of that, right? If you want me to be a BDM in your SaaS business, I pretty much know what I should be doing. I know what my day-to-day is going to consist of. So you probably don't need to outline that in the job ad, right? So the approach that we take instead is we describe the person, right? And yeah, we'll say something like, ideally, you will have had between 3 and 5 years worth of B2B experience selling SaaS into XYZ environment. However, more importantly, people are likely to describe you as, and then we describe the person, right? And we describe their traits and their behaviors and their characteristics. And the idea behind that quite simply is, if I see me being described in the ad, I'm more likely to apply for it,
Of course.
right? And what we want in our job ads, and it's a little less important, literally as we speak today, this is a little less important than it was as recently as a year ago, because a year ago, it was a candidate scarce market. Like
Mm.
candidates were hanging on to their jobs for a grim death. We were just outside of COVID. People were kind of wary about, kind of really risk leaving here and going to a new company, being put on the new probation. It used to be 3 months, now it's 6 months.
Yeah.
Can I risk that? And is that business going to be stable? And particularly for my market, the small business market, is that business going to be stable? Can I risk going there? A year ago, nobody was. And so just describing you was that much more important, right? Because what I wanted to have happen is you see the ad on your device and you read through it, you're scrolling and you're nodding, and you turn to your significant other and say, honey, come and check this out. This is me, right? This is so me, right? So if I see me being described in the ad, I'm more likely to apply. And then the other important thing that we will talk about, and this is often a challenge we find for founders to articulate and to enunciate. And so we have to spend a lot of time really kind of teasing it out from them, or in the absence of it, we have to get them to kind of start thinking about it. And that is their culture,
Of course.
right? So you want me who's had 3 to 5 years worth of experience in this space. You want me to obviously probably to be a decent performer, right? And you want me to leave where I'm at and come and work for you, short of you offering me 50 grand more, which you're probably not going to offer. Why? Why would I? Right? I mean, yeah, sure, maybe your offer to market is exciting and compelling, and I might want to kind of have a piece of that action. But more than likely, if I'm going to make the move, it might be because I think that I'm going to find myself in a better environment. What is that better environment, right? What is the culture of your organization? And again, probably the key that I get our clients to kind of home in on is, who are you as a leader, right? Because I'm going to be reporting to you. I'm going to have to kind of rely on your commercial smarts and know-how, but who you are as a human being, leading me and guiding me and coaching me, mentoring me, maybe even caring for me. Do you actually give a rat's ass about me or not? Which is a very, very big thing in the Australian workplace environment. We're pretty quick at picking up when the boss doesn't give a rat's about us, that it's all about them and their career or their business, et cetera, et cetera. So we spend quite a lot of time trying to tease out, and obviously we don't want to have a job ad that's 2 pages long, but we want to describe to them, this is the environment you're going to be coming into, and this is who I am as a leader. So one of the things we'll try and do, and it's interesting how many are reluctant to do this, is we get them to shoot a 3 to 5 minute video that we call the hero's journey video, right?
Okay.
And that accompanies the ad when it gets put up online. And we probably, none of them ever say, no, I won't do it, but around half of them conveniently never get around to doing it.
But I really love that approach, as you said, about really getting them to demonstrate who they are as a leader, because most people leave jobs because of their manager, isn't it? It's that sweet spot, isn't it, of finding someone that might have a little of dissatisfaction with where they are, and then this nice little oasis-looking place over there that could be worth at least venturing out and exploring and seeing if it could be a good fit. So I just love it. It's just so refreshing. And again, as I said, I've done quite a lot of career coaching and even just the stuff like because I guess you have to coach people in a way to be able to deal with the market that's out there and how people are recruiting. But my gosh, I love hearing
Thank you.
how you're doing things differently, and really is making it so much more human. And that's what is really, really great about this. And also I'd like to loop back to, as you said, about describing the trait of that ideal person in that ad. So recruiting for salespeople. So where does resilience fit into that for you?
Very highly, right? We put our applicants through four different assessments, each of which has at least some element of resilience assessment in it, but one of which, and it's one of the last, so only the very final few people get put through it, is specifically about measuring their inherent resilient capability. So yeah, one of the first things that somebody will go through when they apply with us, once they've done the usual kind of name, rank, and serial number kind of thing, they answer a series of screening questions that we have about their specific experience and their technical competence, et cetera, et cetera. We then get them to do what we call a temperament assessment, right? And what the temperament assessment is designed to do is very specifically get an understanding of that when stress comes on, what will their behavioral response be to that stress? What tools will they pull out of their tool bag to deal with that stressful situation? So when I'm talking to founders and they're in prospect mode, they haven't agreed to kind of necessarily take us on just yet, we'll talk about the fact that sales is an inherently stressful job.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one job, it's the only job, other than maybe the founder themselves, but it's the only employee role where you get out of bed every single day looking forward to being rejected. Right?
Sign me up.
Yeah, right. Let me have more of that. Like today, probably 10 people are going to tell me to go take a hike. Bring that on. Right. And you can tell yourself every no is a step towards yes and all that kind of thing. Yeah, sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, you might need to change some things to get closer to yes. But yeah, we're up against time deadlines. We're up against deliverable in terms of bringing revenue through the door, we're up against rejection. And that is constant. It's on every single day. We're also, of course, in a competitive environment. So never, ever am I going to be selling something in complete and utter blissful isolation of anybody else having a crack at it. Right. So all of that means that it's stressful. So yeah, the temperament assessment gives us an understanding of where are they likely to go when the stress starts to pile on. The way the tool's been designed, it's a proprietary tool, is that it actually helps us understand that as the stress grows, and I'm doing it like this because it's actually plotted on a spider graph kind of thing. So as the stress grows and grows and grows, where does their behavioural response and their emotional response go to? In one of the other assessments that we have, and this is a very, very kind of deep multi-construct psychometric assessment. And the reason I use it, and I've been using it for about 25 years now, is it is one of the most predictively reliable assessments of its kind. So it's in the behavioral part of it because it measures cognitive ability, behavioral traits, and then occupational interests. In the behavioral piece, there are a couple of factors in there that aren't specifically about resilience, and they're not given the label of resilience. But when you combine the two or three of them together, it predicts the resilience. So one of them is something called motivational intensity, right? And it's about how much drive I've got and how much energy I'm going to put into the pursuit of goals and the degree to which I'm going to keep on keeping on in the face of adversity, right? There's another one, which is manageability. And this is always interesting because when I show this to clients and I show them what the benchmark has revealed. So we built a benchmark back in 2018 by profiling using this instrument, 2,500 top quartile B2B performers.
Wow.
Right. And it was fascinating to see the benchmark evolve. And it gives me great joy to understand that human behavior can actually be incredibly predictable, right? So one of the things that there's a scale called manageability, and what we find with the successful B2B solution seller is they're kind of unmanageable, right? So it goes on a scale of 1 to 10. 1s and 2s are rule breakers. 3s and 4s are rule benders, right? And then you go across to the right where you've got the person who at a 10 will ask permission to ask permission.
I love it.
Right. What we find with the cohort who are top quartile performers is they tend to land on either 3, 4, or 5.
Okay.
Right. So these are people who will not accept things at face value. They'll challenge the status quo. They'll probe a little bit deeper. They'll go a little bit harder with the prospect. And so when you've got somebody who's got a high level of motivational intensity and they're in the 3, 4, 5 zone for manageability, we know that in some ways is predicting resilience. And then the other one that we measure, or another one in amongst them, is accommodation, right? So how accommodating am I going to be, right? And of course, when I first got into sales, one of the mantras was the customer's always right. Even if the customer's wrong, the customer's always right. Thankfully, we've got rid of that, and we understand that sometimes customers are dumb, right? And they're wrong. And that's okay. And so what we find with the top quartile sales performers is their level of accommodation, again, sits at 3, 4, 5. And so that level of accommodation, my response to a request from a prospect, and it might be anything like, can you sharpen the pencil, or can you throw more in with the deal, or whatever it might be, but where essentially they're wanting you to bend more in their favor. The response from a 3, 4, 5 is going to be, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I understand that that's probably something that's going to be of importance to you. We're probably not going to be able to kind of shave the price for you, but let's talk about some other accommodations that we can make. Right. So you do the kind of horse trading kind of thing. Whereas somebody who's going to be up around the, say, 6, 7, 8 in accommodating is going to be, oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm more than happy to do that. Yep. If we do that today, will you sign?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, and it's with a desire to please, right? And so again, when we see somebody who's in a 3, 4, 5 for accommodation, there are 3, 4, 5 for manageability, and there are 6, 7, 8 for motivational intensity, the combination of all of that tells us we've got a resilient person here. right? Because there's a combination of behaviors that they will naturally, consistently deploy that allows them to push through the resistance or the setbacks or the failures and the letdowns.
All right, this is fascinating. Oh my gosh. Do you know what? I think we might have to do a part 2 of this at some point, because I'm just, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And then the time's just flown. And if I open one more door here, then I'm going to be respectful of your time as well. So think that oh look, I'm yeah, mind blown, and I think I'd love to have a chat with you even privately a little bit more about this. And
Sure.
I'm really quite interested. As I said, I'm fascinated. I'm really interested in all these things, but I really love, again, seeing all of those different factors, as you said, that you've brought those together to sort of go, if those people that fit within those sort of parameters generally are going to be a resilient person. And it's interesting just to see different aspects of resilience. We've all got our different interpretations or experiences and stuff of what makes somebody resilient, and there's some quite new ones. And I think that that's just super fascinating to explore that, and particularly in the context of finding somebody that's going to be a great salesperson, but also a great team member, especially when if you're looking at startups, a relatively smallish team, and they're going to have to work very closely with the other parts of the company. So it's like, it sounds like it's such a science. And I love that you've really been able to, through all of your experience and creating all of these different tools and metrics, and in conjunction with then being able to educate and do all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I just think it's brilliant. And as I said, I've nerded out a lot over this with you today, and it's been so much fun. But before we go, I just got one more question to ask. Resilience Rocks has a little bit of a musical twist as well, and I love just using music as a way to shift your mood and your energy and build your resilience and get you ready for a challenging thing, or actually pick you up after a challenging thing as well. So I'd love to know for you, if you found yourself in that state where you're wanting to either pick yourself back up or get yourself ready for something, what would be the song that you would play to able to do that in your world?
I don't know if this will sound strange or not, but it's actually from a soundtrack of a Cirque du Soleil performance. And it's actually the headline soundtrack. So the performance was called Saltimbanco. And it's the piece that is there. It's actually called Saltimbanco on the soundtrack, right? And it's a piece that starts off kind of simply and quietly, and then just builds and builds and builds and builds. And I love it for 2 reasons. I love the piece of music and what it does to me emotionally, but I am just such a raving fan of Cirque du Soleil, and was heartbroken when I heard through COVID that they were going into liquidation. But and I think they've come back out of that, which is good. I love absolutely everything that is Cirque du Soleil, including all the behind the scenes, and all of that, the magical and mystery, and the commitment to absolute professional mastery, right? So yeah, Saltimbanco by Cirque du Soleil.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to go and look that up, and
Okay.
I will add that to the Resilience Rocks playlist on Spotify. Yeah, I had the opportunity to see one of the Cirque du Soleil productions when I was in Adelaide many, many years ago. I think it was Totem that
Okay.
I saw. But yeah, oh look, just mind blowing, isn't it? And again, it's just that commitment to professional mastery. And I think, again, it's something that we could always look to and go, my gosh, the commitment to be able to achieve that kind of stuff. Even if we could just take a little percentage of that and apply that into our worlds, like imagine what is possible with that.
Yeah.
So, wow, awesome. Well, I'm sure that there's going to be many people listening to this today that are going to go, I need to know more. I need to have a conversation with James. I need to explore this approach to recruiting and sales. So if someone was wanting to do that, where is the best place to point them to today?
Probably LinkedIn. So it's just James Michael. Think it's small business sales recruiter is my tagline. I can't remember anymore, but just look me up. You'll find me there on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me. Alternately, obviously, there's the website, which is justifiedtalent.com.
And also, too, I know when we were chatting before, you mentioned a scorecard that could be of value to someone that was looking or making that decision around their next steps. So where's the best place for them to get that?
You can find that literally on the homepage of the website. So if you go to justifiedtalent.com and you scroll under the video of my talking head, there's a button there saying, "Are you really ready to hire?" And yeah, that's probably the best place. And I won't read out the URL because it's too bloody long.
No, that's all right. Well, what I'll do is I will pop links to these and also a link to your LinkedIn profile. Also, just feel free to reach out and connect with James on LinkedIn. And if you ask him for it, I'm sure he will shoot you the link over directly as well.
Yeah.
So again, James, thank you so much for this conversation
pleasure.
today. It's been incredible. I said, love nerding out over it, and also looking forward to continuing the conversation beyond today as well. It's been a lot of fun.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you again for joining us today on Resilience Rocks Sales. And until we meet again, be your best. Thanks for joining us again this week on Resilience Rocks Sales. Don't just listen though, take action. The best sales professionals are always learning. Head over to resiliencerocks.com now to go backstage and get the resources mentioned today to help rock your sales goals.